First rule of filmmaking is you do talk about Fight Club. Now, Fight Club is not only one of my all-time favorite movies, and I think one of the best movies ever made for a whole host of reasons. The writing, the direction, the casting, the acting, the scripting. It's perfect. It's a phenomenal movie. If you have not seen Fight Club, somehow, I will probably kind of spoil it. I'm not talking about the story. I'm talking about the cinematography. But the cinematography is very closely tied to the story. So there's probably going to be some spoilers. This is your warning now. Go watch the movie, then come back because you need to see it. Anyway, I've got some slides made up here going over some of the biggest things that make Fight Club such a good-looking movie. And there are also a lot of the things that modern Hollywood is failing miserably at that makes modern movies look so bad. And ultimately, it comes down to three broad umbrella categories that pretty much all filmmaking ultimately falls into, which is your lighting and shadows, your framing, and your color grading. These are probably the three biggest visual aspects of a film. Sound design is extremely important. I'm probably going to do a part 2 to this video on the sounds of Fight Club because the sound design in the movie is really good too. But for now, we're looking at the visuals. Let's go ahead and start out with lighting. I'm going to rant about this one for a little while because this pisses me off so much. Because this movie does this so freaking well. So the cinematographer on Fight Club is Jeff Cronenweth, which, not going to lie, I didn't actually know the name until I started looking into this. Turns out he's done a lot of phenomenal movies that I've always looked up to, so it makes sense that he's got a good track record here. He did Fight Club. His father was also a very notable cinematographer, so it runs in the family, apparently. His use of lighting is just perfect in this movie. He has a very mature understanding of how to use lights, how to soften lights, how to make them harsher, how to mix between the two in such a way that you have both narrative lighting, in the sense that the lighting tells the story in and of itself, while also being extremely grounded and realistic. That is not an easy combination to actually nail, and he nails it in this movie. So let's talk about the softening, right? He uses plenty of diffusion on his lights. The light is technically soft. Look at this bottom image here. Technically speaking, that's actually fairly soft lighting, right? But you still see these hot spots, right? In this one in particular, you can tell, right? There's hot spots here. He's not afraid to put little harsh bits of light here and there, but his primary light, his key light on the, like look at Tyler's face here, right? That's very soft. Look at the narrator's face. He doesn't have a name, by the way. It's just narrator. Look at the narrator's face. This lighting is soft. It is diffused, but he's not afraid to use directional lighting to get all of these harsh shadows at the same time, right? So the light source may be diffused. The light source may be soft, but the direction of the light, the way it's actually interfering with the shape of the actors' faces or whatever, right, is not exactly soft, right? It's still giving you all this definition of all the objects, making everything really tangible, like you can reach out and touch it, right? He has some of the best understanding of how to mix hard and soft light in the movie, and it's absolutely beautiful to watch. Whereas if you're looking at modern movies, it's all completely washed out. Everything's flat. Everything has to be so soft all the time. No shadows anywhere, right? Which brings me along to the shadows, right? I hate modern movies so much. None of them get this right. It's so rare. It's so rare for any modern film, modern cinematographer to actually do this. They're all terrified of shadows. Like if you've been learning filmmaking for a while, you know that one of the most important tenets of cinematography is shoot the shadow side. Okay? Always. There are very few exceptions to this. You shoot the shadow side. If you don't know what that means, I've got my key light coming right here. Sure, right? So if this weren't an A-roll shot, now we're trying to get B-roll of me sitting here talking at this desk, I'd put the camera here, right? Like in line with the light source, but behind me, right? You want to get the shadow side. You want to get this definition, this edge light over everything. That's what really gives your image depth and layers, and it makes it so much more tangible, and you start to feel more like you're actually in the scene. And practically every shot in this movie has this. Practically every single shot has this incredible depth and texture to it because he uses so much backlighting, so much edge lighting, and because he leans into the shadows and owns the shadows and lets the dead space speak for itself. It's the same tenet used in music, actually, right? In music, you let the pauses, like if you're a cellist, right? You let the pauses between each, I don't know, what's that called? Stroke? I don't know. you let the pauses between them speak as if they're their own musical notes, right? The silence in between each note is the music itself. And he understands that the shadows, the dead space, the black space in the shot is the same thing. You have to use shadows. Do not be afraid of shadows. They're what gives your image depth, and that is one of the most important things. Another reason why Fight Club looks the way it does is that practically the entire movie is shot at night. You've got plenty of day scenes, yes, but not just in the sense that when they're filming, it's usually nighttime, but even when they're indoors, right? It could be night, it could be day. Look at this bottom right image here, right? This is in the basement. It's still shot as if it's night. And I think in this scene it is in fact nighttime, but they're shooting everything in this really dark way. And it's interesting because the movie isn't actually even that dark. I mean, yes, it's a psych thriller, but it's, as far as psych thrillers go, it's one of the lighter ones, if you ask me. There's a sort of dark comedy to this movie that could easily warrant it not being as cinematically dark as it is. And yet he decided to film a lot of this movie at night, and even when it's daytime, still kind of have this nighttime kind of element to it. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not sure if I explained that all that well, but it's worth noting. Now we need to talk about framing. Now this is something that I think modern movies are still doing a pretty good job of. I don't think we've lost too much here. But virtual production in particular, and I'll talk about this at the last slide as well, virtual production has led to this over-centering of subjects, where we always want them in the center of the frame, no matter what, because the stage is a circle. I've talked about that in a previous rant, and it's really freaking annoying. But there is a time and a place to center your subjects, and it's usually when you want them to feel more isolated. So throughout most of this movie, but it changes as the story progresses, the framing is such that you looking at him feel alone. You feel isolated, which is how he's feeling. And sometimes that means he's center frame and the only subject in frame, like in these three images. Sometimes it means, yes, he's the only subject, but he's not in center frame, like in this one here. And sometimes he's surrounded by other people in the frame, and yet because he's centered, and because you have all of this negative fill, right? All of the shadow space that he's not afraid to use, it separates him from all these guys in the background and still makes him feel completely isolated and alone. And remember when I talked about narrative lighting, how the lighting kind of tells the story in and of itself? The framing does the exact same thing. So at the start of the movie, this is pretty much how we see the narrator in most of the shots. He's usually in these very isolating shots. Once Tyler gets introduced, we start to see a break in that pattern. We start to see every shot with him and Tyler side by side. The framing is no longer centered, right? The narrator is no longer in the middle of the frame. This illustrates that with Tyler around, the narrator doesn't feel so alone anymore, right? It illustrates that Tyler is sort of his coping mechanism. And this duality continues throughout most of the movie, where when the narrator's alone, he's in this isolated framing, and when he's with Tyler is the only time he's not. Except for, what's her name, Laura Singer? Something Singer, I forget. Where when he's with her, the framing also doesn't make him feel completely isolated. And that's particularly important for the very last scene of the movie, where he and Singer are holding hands, beautifully framed by this window pane, I might add, after he's defeated Tyler Durden. And this kind of indicates the end of his personal healing journey, right? And now he no longer feels alone. He can connect with other people without having to have Tyler around. Unfortunately, I could not find a whole lot of still frames to represent this, but he used a lot of foreground blocking in the movie, where you're essentially putting anything between you and what you're trying to be looking at. This makes you feel a little bit more claustrophobic, a little bit more detached from reality, which of course is kind of the theme of the whole movie. So with Singer, of course, we just got this hat blocking part of her face, kind of like Wicked style. Here we just have a pane of glass between us and the subject with a little bit of this is probably that Vaseline trick to have water actually stick to it, right? Anything to break up the image between us, the viewer, and what we're looking at, the subject, the main character. There are a lot of sequences in this movie where he uses these window panes to accomplish this, or fence posts or anything like that. It's really interesting. And then lastly, on to, I would argue, probably the most important part of all this. It's all extremely important. If you lose one of these, you kind of lose it all. But color grading is incredibly important in a movie like this. It's important in all movies, but especially one like this. I've talked a lot about the Matrix color grade, this kind of green and yellow, green and blue color grade that isn't a natural way for human skin complexions of any kind to reflect light. This accomplishes the uncanny valley effect, where we look at this and we're not used to seeing people's skin tones look like this, and it tricks our brain into feeling that something's wrong here, right? This isn't a human face like I know it. And it leads to this very uncomfortable, disconcerting feeling that puts you on edge and makes you feel like something is off here, something is wrong. In The Matrix, they use this in all of the scenes inside of the Matrix to kind of indicate, okay, this isn't real, something's off here, and they don't use it when they're out of the Matrix. And in Fight Club, they use it both for all of the office scenes to indicate the narrator's frustration and disappointment with his life and with his corporate job. And then it gets particularly strong when we get to the confrontation between the narrator and Tyler Durden. But they also use a little bit more cool light, cooler tones for Tyler's face during that whole scene. It still makes you feel a little bit on edge, a little bit afraid of Tyler, but he doesn't look sickly. The narrator looks sickly in that scene because they use a lot more green in that color grade, which just makes him look even more inhuman to us. So let's compare what we've learned here for good and bad cinematography. I'm essentially comparing the legendary classic cinematographers from somewhat older movies to a lot of the slop we're getting today. Obviously, these cinematographers are still around, still doing great work. There are plenty of incredible cinematographers out there today. But film school is terrible, and we're getting a lot of bad ones now. So you'll notice in all the new, Netflix shows and most movies now that we have all of these problems that I've kind of discussed, all the things that Fight Club did right. Most of these modern shows and movies are doing wrong. First thing we talked about is the lighting. New cinematography just is obsessed with just getting rid of as many shadows as possible, getting rid of as much definition, especially in faces, as possible. Again, I've done a rant on why they're doing this. There is some logic behind it, absolutely. But there's also just some basic vanity behind this where the actors think it looks better. It is. It's more flattering for the human face to have this really soft, flat lighting on the face like this. It can be more flattering. So there's a lot of reasons why they're doing this. But you lose out on this sort. Look at the texture. Look at the depth of this scene. You just feel like you're there in the car with them. It's incredible. And there's not much light here. Most of this shot, what is that? 60, 70% of this shot is all just shadow. Do not be afraid of your shadows. Your shadows are what makes your image look good. It's what makes it look like it's in the room with you. And not to mention, it's what makes it look realistic. Because this is not how we see light. This is not... Nowhere are you going to go on Earth and see light this soft. That's not a thing. It's not going to be this consistent, right? Even if you go out in a completely overcast day, it still doesn't look like this. If you're in a car with somebody at night in the back seat, looking at him in the front seat, this is what you see. You see this harsh lighting on the front of his face from the street lights, and everywhere else the shadows are crushed because the light's so bright outside and so dark inside. This is how we see the world. A little bit exaggerated for cinematic effect, but this is how we see the world. This is not. Next, the best cinematographers are using extremely deliberate framing in all of their shots. The framing of a scene, I'm talking about both where the character is on screen, where they're moving on screen, which side of the screen they're on when they're moving, which direction are they moving. All of that has a huge impact on how we as the audience are feeling when we're watching this action, right? If a character is moving from left to right across the screen, our brains kind of interpret that as progress, right? We're moving forward. If they're moving right to left, it's the opposite. They're regressing. They're going backwards. If they're walking and we're pushed in really close on their face, it feels a little bit more fast-paced, like maybe they're late for something. Maybe they're rushing to something. If we zoom out a lot, if we have a really wide shot and a still shot in particular, and we just watch them walk across the frame, now they feel isolated. Now they feel very alone. You'll see that a lot in Fight Club. Whereas modern movies are just basically slapping everything in the dead center of the frame, right? You can see that in this example here because this, I can already tell, this is the volume, this is digital production, it has to be. It screams digital production. Sorry, virtual production. Because those stages are circular and the screens are like a crescent, it just is the most natural, makes the most sense to put your subject in the center of the frame, even when it doesn't necessarily work to the psychological goal of the entire scene. And then lastly, the good movies, the good cinematographers, they color grade to make it look right, not to make it look good. When I edit this, I'll give you an example, right? So I've color graded this video that you're watching right now to look good because it's going on YouTube. I'm not trying to instill an emotion in you. I'm just trying to talk about something. So I just want it to look good. But if I were trying to make you feel uncomfortable, I don't want it to look good. I want it to look ugly. I want it to look really ugly. I want it to look so ugly that you feel uncomfortable looking at it. Or vice versa. If I want to make you feel really comfortable, I'm going to go a little bit overboard. I'm making everything really warm tones, everything really soft, right? Even though it might not necessarily look the best, it's going to be the most appealing and comforting and welcoming to you, the viewer. The way that you color grade something has an immense psychological effect on the viewer, and you need to make sure that you're grading in such a way to support the particular emotion that you want them to feel. You're not trying to make a good-looking image. You're trying to make an image that makes the viewer feel a certain way. Don't forget that. Anyway, that's my rant on Fight Club. It's absolutely beautiful. One of the greatest cinematographers of all time. I can't believe I didn't even know his name, but he's incredible. I really wish that we could see more movies like this, more cinematic masterpieces like this. Unfortunately, the industry's changed a little bit. In some cases, there are good reasons for doing things differently. In some cases, there are no good reasons to be doing it differently. And in either case, it's done wrong. So go see Fight Club if you haven't already. If you have seen it, go watch it again. I watched it last night. It was as good as I remember it being. And if there's something you want me to talk about next week, let me know in the comments. I just moved, so I've got a new studio here. Hopefully you'll like it. Much more content to come. Hope this helps. Have a great day.